I wanted to come on today to celebrate the life and remember a fun, very fun person and the ghost story of that said fun person by honoring Joe Turkel. And any fans of his work will know why I am opening a little bit of Jack Daniels right now and pouring it into an Al Capone shot glass. We will raise a toast to him at the end. Who was Joe Turkel? Obviously, if you saw the thumbnail, you probably got an idea that, yes, from The Shining. That's maybe his most iconic work as we take a look at him right here. Now, Joe, as we see him there in The Shining, and as he looked about the time that I knew him, I have to, I don't want to overstate. It's not like we're tight, like we're good friends or anything like this, but he would come into a print shop where I worked. I worked in Santa Monica at this really, really good print shop. And most of the type of work that we did, we made 8x10s for celebrities that would then go to autograph shows or elsewhere to try to just sign and sell autographs. And we had a lot of amazing characters come through that place. It should have been its own reality show. But Joe was one such guy, and he was just an incredible human being. And he did share a personal ghost story that I'm going to relate to you. I'm sure a lot of you have heard it as well. I don't know if it's out there that much, but I'm sure a lot of individual people have heard it as he was going around signing autographs. But he was this no nonsense Brooklyn guy that had charm, that he could be insulting as he was charming, and you would kind of just roll with it. And he was always very kind to me, but my bosses were kind of blowhards that love to hear the sound of their own voice. And of course, I'm sitting there working as a Photoshop editor all day long, having to listen to this all the time. And then Joe would come in and just quickly cut them down, put them in their place. And again, not in a super rude way, but just in a cutting, fun, hysterical way to me. I mean, that's how I took it, at least. And then we would talk and we'd have a good time. So yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about Joe. He just passed away last summer, summer of 2022. I did not know that at the time. I just found out myself. So it was such a bummer to hear. But yes, he was 94 years old when he passed. So he did have an incredible life. He is famous for being the only person, the only actor to have been directed by Stanley Kubrick 3 times. Along with The Shining, it was Paths of Glory and also The Killing. It's really cool to look here and see that his final tweet, which he was not exactly a prolific Twitter person, but his final tweet was about working with Kubrick. My inspiration was and always will be Stanley Kubrick. My career without him would have been mediocre at best. His influence is infinite. So he certainly appreciated all the time that they spent together and his impact on Joe's career. Now, as you saw earlier, I poured my whiskey into a Capone glass, and that's because he was also in, I just found this out myself. I have to find this movie. He was in a movie called The St. Valentine's Day Massacre with George Segal. He played Greasy Thumb Jack Goodzik, who was an actual big-time mobster at the time. But George Segal was in this movie, and most interesting to me, it was written and directed by Roger Corman. So you see it down at the very bottom there. And this also, this movie poster is a piece of art. I have to find a print of this somewhere and get it framed for the screening room. Other than all of his work with Stanley Kubrick, his most iconic role was in Blade Runner, Dr. Tyrell. So he's in 2 different movies that have been immortalized within the Library of Congress as iconic films that need to be preserved forever. The Shining, of course, and here, Blade Runner. So let's get to the ghost story, and then we're going to dive into some maybe possible causes for this ghost story. His ghost story is tied in with a photo that he would get printed at the shop I worked at and have signed. And he loved to talk about, at least with me, he loved to talk about this ghost story, which is when they were filming this scene here, it was maybe a long day. It was getting difficult. Whatever the case, it seemed like there was a tense moment, and Stanley Kubrick said, "Everybody out. I need to have a meeting with my actors." And when, as Joe would say, when Kubrick cleared the set, nobody wandered around, nobody waited around, nobody milled about. Everybody just got the hell out of there. So that was a conversation time for just Kubrick and Joe, and of course Jack Nicholson, as you see there, and his director of photography, which I'm guessing there's a lot of big time Shining historians out there. The guy standing behind Stanley Kubrick here, I'm guessing was his director of photography. Maybe it was the first assistant director. Usually the first AD would stick around, something like that as well. Not exactly sure. So it's supposed to be this small group of just these four people. And obviously the behind the scenes photographer is there as well. But Joe would say, hey, who the heck is this guy back here? Hiding in the shadows. You just see his chin, his nose. And in fact, Joe would say that there was not anybody there at the moment that that photo was taken. So who is that? So Joe really believed that this was a possible ghost caught on film in this moment. We don't have an answer for that. Maybe if anybody, first off, I'm curious, anybody out there who has gotten autographs from Joe, as you see, this is a signed photo. If anybody out there has gotten an autograph from Joe and had an interesting exchange with him, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what anybody else has to say. And has anybody else heard this story before, whether it was from Joe himself, or maybe it's made it out there into different types of The Shining documentation? This movie is such a celebrated film that I don't think any bit of trivia goes out there that isn't celebrated. But I'd never heard this one before, but it is an interesting and odd thing that there is somebody there. And according to Joe, there was nobody there when that photo was taken. Okay, so of course we all know that the strange goings on at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado is what inspired Stephen King to write the book, The Shining. Of course, when Stephen King wrote about it, he didn't call it the Stanley, he called it the Overlook, but it wasn't filmed there. Nothing was filmed at the Stanley Hotel. The place that stood in for the Stanley was called the Timberline Lodge, and that is up in Portland, Oregon. But really, I think it's primarily, if not exclusively, just interior or exteriors that were shot at the Timberline Lodge. Most of the interior filming, especially things like the hotel rooms and the bar, were shot at Elstree Studios in England. So I looked around, and sure enough, there are lots of different ghost stories about Elstree Studios, and I'll share these links. This one is poorly written, and I don't mind saying it. But yes, this article mentions that the studios were on the grounds of where a family died of the Black Plague many years ago. Elstree Studios soon became known as the Haunted Studios. And over the years, famous actors and crew would whisper to each other about personal objects being moved in the dressing rooms, showers being turned on full, and worse. The sounds of children whispering and singing, and men growling when no one was there. And the TV show Most Haunted Live actually used the location for a 3-night investigation in 2005. I'll have to find that, see if I can watch that sometime. There's a much better story here from the Borehamwood and Elstree Times that goes into the details and the history of the place. And it seems like there's a bit of a curse, according to this article at least, where different owners would just continually find financial ruin throughout the many years that this studio stood. So this article does go through a number of different owners and how they fell on hard times after purchasing the studios. But it does also posit the idea that there is a watchful spirit here that is just looking over things and actually trying to protect it, maybe from people that wouldn't have managed it well. Unfortunately, this article just gets cut off mid-sentence, so I don't know where it was going to go from here. Digging a bit deeper into Elstree Studio, we find a wrench in the problems, which is that Elstree Studios is a generic term that can refer to several current and demolished British film studios. Elstree Studios was a huge complex once upon a time and probably scattered around this neighborhood. Some of it still remains. I'm not exactly sure which building or buildings The Shining was shot in, and if those buildings are still standing today. But we can see Britain's first sound film ever was shot here, which was Alfred Hitchcock's Blackmail. Very cool. Also 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Shining, the Indiana Jones films, Star Wars, and maybe the most important one culturally, Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody music video is filmed here. Okay. Maybe not the most important one culturally, but I think it's cool. So as we head on over, just to take a look at it, I always like to look at things on Google Earth. Here is the studio. This pretty large complex is still standing. As we see, not all of it was, but we can zoom in and look around here, and we see there are condos, there are storefronts. I think this is a big apartment complex right next door, but you see this old brick building, that's definitely still a part of the studio. And this large one here, right where the pin is dropped, Elstree Studios, that's still standing. Those are definitely sound stages that are still present. And it's just amazing how close the neighborhood has encroached around it. I wonder how isolated it was once upon a time. But there are large studios back here as well. Now, as we see, Netflix has staked their claim. Oh, there's some backlots right there. That's neat to see. Um, Netflix is everywhere. And we can even see an ad for the Crown on the side of that building. So definitely a lot of production still happens in this location. There we go. Stage 1 is the George Lucas stage. I had heard that they filmed on stage 5, so I don't know if we'll be able to find any other labeled and numbered stages, but I wonder if one of these may have been stage 5. But yes, there is Elstree Studios, sandwiched between so many other buildings right across the street from a McDonald's. But the haunted studios are still there. I did find other articles that talked about how the old MGM part of it had been just abandoned and left vacant. And people talked about wandering through these old sound stages and screening rooms that were definitely used by Kubrick and Spielberg throughout the years. And now we're just empty shells of buildings and totally decimated. But anyway, so I just wanted to share a little bit about Joe Turkel, who was a very cool guy. I loved it when he would visit the shop. Plus a really cool ghost story, I thought. And I don't think there's very many other celebrities that would have appeared at those autograph shows where they could say that they were signing a ghost photo. Everybody was getting it because, hey, it's Nicholson and Kubrick and Joe Turkel in that photo, but there's also a phantom dude in the background. So to Joe, thanks for being a great, fun guy to come visit the shop. You are absolutely missed. And well, cheers. And again, if anybody else has any Joe Turkel stories, definitely leave it in the comments. Thanks for watching.